Well, as we were saying, I started my broadcast journalism,
Mm-hmm.
working as an anchor in Area TV, which is the state-owned TV
Mm-hmm.
station in Eritrea. I edited, reported. Sometimes I did documentary projects for the TV station.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me a very important question about how if it's progress that they're starting to broadcast to the DAS. Not having independent media is very crucial because you don't include other voices that are not following the government's line of news that comes out of the country. So that's one aspect of not the problem of lack of independent media in the country. Another thing is the intimidation towards reporters, especially reporters that were working in independent outlets. We had newspapers, a lot of newspapers, 11 I think to my recollection, before the crackdown in 2001. And shortly after a war broke between Eritrea and Ethiopia, they arrested all of the reporters that were in management positions in the newspapers. And the reason behind the arrest, according to a statement given by the government, is that they were posing a national threat. Nobody's seen them since then. And there are campaigns calling for the release of these journalists, and it's not the first time that reporters have been arrested. One of the things that people forget even since then is that there have been continuous intimidation of reporters. I can give you a specific example. 2009, Radio Bana, which is an educational radio station based in Asmara, was raided. A number of reporters were arrested. I don't know what the content of the broadcast was, but the mission of that radio station is educational, broadcasts educational programs, teaching English. They have different content, but Radio Bana is known for educational content, and it works with the Ministry of Education. The reporters that was arrested during this time was Yirgalem Fisaha Mebratu is her name, and I remember her very poetic, very passionate about writing, and she used to freelance, I think, for the Eritrean Profile, which is the newspaper that is state-owned. And so, you see stifling of the media occasionally here and there. It happens so gradually that people don't see the impact sometimes, because it's not like one dramatic event. It usually happens gradually. We only have one state-owned media TV station, and there's lack of funding. And people try to freelance, they try to write things, but if you write things that are critical of the government, you constantly have to look over your shoulder, obviously.
I was gonna say, they still will. Considering I know this gets going on a lot, and you did mention like how in 2001 those journalists you still have not seen.
Wow. Here's the irony of all of it. When that happened, I was there. I was in college. I do remember the crackdown, and I do remember, because we look at it from a security issue for all of us, people who live there, because there was war going on between the two countries. So you're not looking at it from a press perspective where you have vibrant press asking questions and stuff. You don't look at it that way. Even the writers, reporters, everybody is in the military. So you have to also understand that when you say, and when you look at the individual cases, these are not only just acting reporters, but also part of like the system that is militarized.
Right. So they're all a part of it. That to me. I wonder though, like, if being there now, do you feel? Obviously, us being on the outside, like now looking into it, you're not actually there now, so now you have the opportunity to say what you want. But do you feel as though, are the rates of like imprisonment there still like is it still as high? I know that they're ranked as like the top country in Africa to like be imprisoning their journalists, but at the same time we have to also look at like the population rate to how many, like the people, it's a very small country too. So they say it's the most journalists, but at the same time, sometimes I think those reports can be a little bit inaccurate, when they say that. But at the same, do you feel like if somebody were to speak out and they were in Eritrea and speaking freely or like trying to go around, do you feel as though like they could probably be imprisoned right away? Is it still as?
Well, the way I see it, I sort of mentioned it to you earlier about the unpredictability of the government, the nature of unpredictability. And the reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes you see extreme cases of imprisonment and you don't know how to rationalize it. I gave you an example of the minister of information running away, and his daughter, his dad, his brother being arrested. I mean, those are higher cases of imprisonment. But if you really think about speaking your mind, I think it really has to do with how much of a threat you pose to people who are in power or who you piss off. Maybe, I don't know. I cannot really pinpoint and say this is the reason. But one person in prison is enough for people to start asking questions, in my opinion. But as I said earlier, things happen so gradually and people are so caught up with everyday life, everyday priorities that they have to fulfill, they don't really understand what it's doing to the society, basically, And everybody is constantly thinking about, doing their national service. They're thinking about, the daily grind of providing for their families and things like that really matter. So I don't really blame it, but there's lack of education, as you said, of really understanding your right. Your right to ask questions, your right to. It's not fair to say, you know what, we know what's going on in the country and leave it at that. If you're a reporter, for example, working in the Ministry of Information, you should be able to have access to cabinet meetings, not just selected individuals to go and ask questions. But as a reporter, just the fact that you know about the state of the government, the state of your country, the state of what's going on from only the government outlet should be questioned.
I will say this though, when you were mentioning how just one person being imprisoned is enough, and I 100% agree with that, to the point where I don't think, I mean, like I said, I'm on the fence on like who I would side with at this point. If somebody came to me, and I know you mentioned, I don't think I can actually defend that. It's like I know that we have respect for our people.
You shouldn't. Yeah.
It's like we have respect for our people, but at the same time, there's a level of just wrong.
You need to draw the line. That's exactly what I was saying. Every time, it's really interesting being in the diaspora right now, because some people try to question things, and then they take it so much further to the point where they're compromising their principles.
Right.
Right. And so, I mean, how could you be in a place where, they're doing this for national security reasons, and America's doing this, so, there's wrong other places, so we should also compromise and say it's okay?
No.
It doesn't make sense to me. And I gave you specific examples of, the Minister of Information. Who knows where he is? People don't know where he is right now. He ran away in 2012. Wow. So it's been almost 2 years. It's the same with the people that were imprisoned in 2001, and one of the most important things about events like that is if it happens to them, it sure will happen to you, and it does happen to people. And another example I could give you from just working in the Ministry of Information is, I remember at some point, was it in early 2005, 6, one of the head of the department ran away, absconded, whatever you want to call it. He was sent to represent the ministry or get an education somewhere else, and he fled because he wanted to reunite with his wife. Don't want to mention names, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because even at moments like that when people just disappear, I'm talking about not in prison, but just running away and not coming back. Imagine your colleague not coming back to work. Right. It is your right to ask where someone is. But even doing that is people are scared of it because you talk and there are rumors inside the office, and then you fear for yourself. What if people think that you are also thinking about doing the same thing? So you don't want to ask questions too far, so that you're not regarded in a way that might cause you to be questioned when you have zero understanding of what's going on.
Right. I think that's a good point that you bring that up, because obviously, like, that's also when you bring up the point of you just don't know, and that uncertainty, and that when I know that I stress the question of, well, what's happening? I stress the question of, well, do you think something could happen to me from promoting, or do you think something could happen to you? Do you fear that? But I think you're right. It's who you're going to piss off. It's situational. It seems to be. Although it doesn't have a huge push in Eritrea, but maybe from being there, before moving here, or maybe just speaking with family members too, as far as social media goes, has there been any uprisings with social media there? I know there has been here. I know that there's been a lot of alternative news groups here. There's all of you guys on social media, Twitter, Bloomberg News, like what they're doing. I mean, there's been so much, but what about there? Any kind of conflicts?
Here's the most important thing that I've noticed when it comes to digital, communication or social media. Let's focus on social media. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, of course, internet is such a luxury, but interestingly, the Facebook pages that you see that try to have like some political discussion when it comes to the country are very vibrant.
Right.
Like, people say whatever they want. It's as if like they don't have anybody looking. It's like maybe because as I said, the access is limited, and they don't have that much. Like if you sit, let's say, if you go to the internet cafe in Asmara, sit down and try to open a page, it would basically take you, depending on if it's a good day, you might get access after 15 minutes or so, or depending on what you were trying to do with it. But social media is very vibrant in Eritrea, and I don't know if people like to use Twitter, but Facebook is very, very interactive. People send out information. In fact, they want to, use it as an outlet. But there's a catch. You have to sit down for half an hour to open a page. I don't know if you've ever experienced
I've heard
anything like that.
Have you noticed a lot of people maybe with their own personal laptops or their own computers, or maybe not more so in the village, but in other areas?
It's a luxury. People have, people in the diaspora send money. They send them. In fact, most of the people that are able to use internet, we're talking about urban cities.
Right.
And the percentage is, unbelievably very low. And if you look at it from a country, we're talking about only like Asmara or Masawa, or those little hubs of little, cafes here and there. But overall, as a country, it's not even thought about. And also, another thing that you need to understand about, access to internet and even using social media is some people don't know what to do with it. And lack of understanding of what to do with internet also is important to consider, because, okay, you have all the means you want, but if you don't know what to do with it, what's the point? You can go on the internet and let's say, you can send a little chat here and there, and so people use it to connect with diaspora, with family members, just to say hello, hi, this is what's happening, and then go about their daily lives. So that awareness, that awakened mentality of what you can use the internet for does not really exist. So lack of understanding of what you could do with the internet also factors in when you look at, the future of using social media for social justice doesn't really apply at this point in time. Also, another thing that I've noticed about the reporting about the status of internet or people or companies or think tanks that really monitor growth is that there's huge disconnect about what happens on the ground. When you live and work there, you understand that let's say I saw some report from Reporters Without Borders.
Right.
about they say, oh, military police lurks around. They lurk around. They lurk around all the time. That's part of it's. Also, the context is missing because the people that are using the internet were soldiers themselves. So there's a disconnect of understanding the military that the country's it's a military state from the get-go. Yeah. Even when they're not lurking around like a military police is not lurking around looking at what you're typing on the internet to see if they're going to report you. It doesn't make sense.
Well, and also, you were mentioning earlier, and I don't know if I heard this correctly, but do you think it's also that everybody, a lot of them were in the military or are a part of the military, so it's, is it because you think that they all just have that understanding to not advocate things negatively?
Brainwashed at an early age. Like when we went to military, when I was, when we were doing our military service, every day you have political understanding of what the revolution was about, all these things that make people, everything that translates into nationalism. You're basically indoctrinated at early age, so you get the drift. You know what is expected of you. Even before you go to those ministries that I talked about, after you are done with your high school or whatever. And so you are molded in a way to think the way the government wants you to think before you go into any profession that you want to do. So fear comes from an early age, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Fear of not knowing, what is expected of you. So that's very important to understand when you write about, access to internet can bring about social justice. Sure, I mean, the fact that people are asking the right questions, are being introduced to information that they have no clue existed before, and being connected, even just the simple act of even talking to someone who is abroad and maybe struggling to get a job might give someone within to understand that life is not all great when you leave. Maybe it could prevent someone from running away. But then again, you compare life within and see how even someone who is left to Sudan, it doesn't have to be in Europe or America. Someone who's left to Sudan, who's selling tea on the streets, is making more money and sending back money. That says to them that there's some sort of economical problem within. So that connectiveness and being connected with diaspora, with people who are family members, who are with you, who went to school with you, who were once with you in the military, you see progress, even if it's not really that much of a huge difference. You see that you are missing out as a young person looking outside. And so it sort of has it's really interesting. I mean,
no, it's interesting that when you bring up the fact that that's the type of progress, whereas the only type of progress I even had centered myself or thoughts around was the social activism progress, and that's not all that is. It's
and you've talked to Salem, right? You've talked to. I think I've seen The Economist did a profile about robocalls, whatever. Mm-hmm. I saw that. I mean, I don't know how effective it is because I'm sure. I mean, it might make some dent. It might raise awareness. People might question what's going on. But I don't think that, as I said, the level of people are caught up with their daily lives. I think priority matters here because if you're thinking about what you're going to eat tonight, if you're thinking about, what should I do, daily life priorities, you're not going to think about a phone call making a difference.
I hear you.
You know what I mean?
And I was going to say, I want to take a side note because I have other questions to ask, but it's interesting when you bring up the fact that everybody knows it's something that was ingrained within you to not question certain things that can spark interest from the military or from the government or, when social media started becoming more active in the country. So where are these so-called world press freedom ratings coming from? And the index of still being the most, the highest country with the most imprisoned journalists, where is that coming from? I mean, if everybody within the country knows not to kind of test those waters, and then now in 2001 having them shut down all of the privatized media, why are we still at the top
because
ratings.
there's no independent media. We're the only country in the continent. We're talking about 50 plus countries that don't have independent media. We don't. Imagine Somalia. It's one of like the most chaotic places that you could be, but still, reporters are churning out news. Imagine that's the hunger for learning and understanding what's around you. Having the freedom to say, to question or bring about someone doing some corrupt, government leadership, corruption in it, questioning, what journalism could do, basically, the mission of journalism.
Right.
And not having that, period. We're talking about a government machine, basically churning in and out things that are in favor of leadership, period.
I feel like people understand the system now, so they're not doing as much as they would have before, or maybe even being taken to prison or anything bad happening anymore, because people have just been trained to think that way and not really speak up or do anything. So
there are different factors playing in here because there's a huge migration of the youth, for example. So who is there to question? If you're dreaming about leaving the country, who's there to question the authority? That's one major problem. You've probably experienced it yourself when you talk to people. All they think about is coming to the West or anywhere else but there. That's a major, major, major problem. In fact, I've talked about this with other people, and they always say, I remember recently there was an article about it blowing up, whatever. No, that's not what I noticed. The government is confident enough that it's never going to be questioned by, not never, but the people are not questioning it, that they're handing them AK-47. Okay? Forget about freedom of press. We're talking about the power to physically, violently, take over if you want to, but people don't want to do that because there's nobody that the young people are running away. Okay, that's a major, major factor. I personally think.
No, I agree with that.
There's a lot of young people saying, we don't want to deal with this. We've seen enough. We just want something better. We just want to get out. So that I see that.
Future of journalism in Eritrea, where do you see it going?
Well, that's part of the reason why I'm doing my continuing, trying to. And one of the most disappointing things that I've noticed is that everybody that was with me in the Ministry of Information or doing journalism comes to the West or leaves the country and just completely changes profession, which is kind of sad. You see it here as well. But the industry is not really that encouraging. Part of the reason why I started my own website, Africa Talks, is because I wanted to continue that outlet where I feel like, I can have like some sort of voice because I have hands-on experience. I've seen it. I feel like I can create some sort of like outlet. I believe that every kind of opinion should be included. And even like, you see there's a lot of, opposition websites outside the country, starting in Sudan, all of like they have significant number of informants from within sometimes that are popping up here and there, but they're only based on broadcasting through the internet and radio. They're trying. There's hope for it. I do believe that there's hope for it. And the discouraging voices that come in defense of the government, sometimes they say, they're very sensationalized. They always lie about things. There's no credibility. Yes, sometimes they exaggerate things, partly because there's no access, or maybe partly because some people tend to exaggerate information that comes out of the country. But the thing is, if you have the mindset to get as much information as you can and filter information, you will be able to get the truth in between. It's in between. Whether you hear it from the government or from opposition websites, you have to be able to always filter things and get information by the end of the day. I do believe that there's hope and that aspect of it. And I remember even when because I studied journalism when I was in Eritrea. It's really interesting because what I learned in school, because it's the same as the curriculum in the West. If you look at the books that we read, if you see what we were doing when we were in school and what we were practicing when we were in the Ministry of Information are completely disconnected. It's as if like you were trained to really become a reporter, like then you go in there and you're basically sitting there and translating things, especially if they have like political content. Of course, if it's fluff, if you're talking about tourism in Eritrea, come see the beautiful islands and beautiful coast, of course nobody's going to question you. But if you're talking about there's corruption and whatever, if you want to really dig deep into political route, if you want to ask real tough questions, and then you see where you're limited. Forget about being a woman and practicing, and that's another issue. But just reporting in the country is very difficult as it is. And that applies in the region, not just Eritrea. But the fact that you don't even have that medium is what the problem is. That medium, even getting, let's say if you want to get a license and have your own radio station or your own TV station, there are so many limitations and so many restrictions already in place that people are not encouraged. What's the point? I mean, there's no money in journalism, people are not encouraged because of that. And if you seek for funding from other places, you are automatically labeled some sort of, traitor or whatever. And so
we got funding from, Eritrea got funding from China, I believe, right? And this is a side note, but they got funding for like telecommunications, Aritel.
Oh yeah.
There was some funding going on there, so I don't know if I haven't delve into that too much, but
don't even get me started with this hypocritical. It only works for ideologues who tread into one sort of like this ideology that fits their own little, it becomes political, basically, is what I'm trying to say. When funding comes from places and entities that really satisfy their needs, and then it's not, dependent anymore. You know what I mean? It's independent in their eyes. So, it also depends on how you look at it. But basically, even as a citizen, let's say I want to open my own newspaper. I maybe have a lot of money to spare, and I want to open my own newspaper and want to include voices that question authority. That is, even getting there is a huge obstacle.
Well, now, the question I want to ask you that, because I agree with you on that. That's going to be the big obstacle. There's no money involved in it. If there is going to be money coming from outsourcing from another country, they're going to use it for their own interests, considering that we're still in the position that we are in the government today. They're going to take that. They're not going to use it for these other areas of improvement that we see fit, obviously. But how do you feel about creating something like that which is things that you've done? You already have started social movements with your social media that you put up and your websites, everything. I feel, how do you feel about starting that here and then maybe one day that having such an effect on Eritrea that things start to change? What are your thoughts on that?
I do believe, I'm very hopeful. I'm always optimistic about things, even when I remember even when we were in the military, people complain about waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I say, people go to the gym and pay for this, you guys. I've always been very optimistic about things. I do believe that, I believe in the mission of journalism. I've always believed in the mission of journalism. I don't care of course, you can always look at the negative obstacles. You could say, people are imprisoned. But you know what? Sacrifice means, it doesn't mean that you're going to sit somewhere in a remote place and say something and not make a difference. Sacrifices are made basically because you want to change things. The people that are imprisoned, whether it's because they did something that threatened the national security or whatever, if they're carrying the mission of journalism with integrity, if they're staying true to their message, that's what I believe in. I don't care if things are sensationalized or not, or whatever. The point I'm trying to make is carrying the mission of journalism with integrity, no matter where you are.